and leadership after moving them through regular order. We'll first take up a series of nuclear bills today aimed at modernizing our nuclear licensing structure to bring clean, reliable, and baseload generation online. Our shared goal in this committee is to advance bipartisan, durable policy that will expand nuclear energy and its benefits for the nation. Chair Rogers and Ranking Member Pallone and DeGette and I sent a bipartisan request for information to a variety of stakeholders this past April. Based on feedback from this request and the hearings we've had since, it's clear that more can be done to modernize the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Department of Energy, to advance nuclear energy in this country. In our July legislative hearing, we heard from the NRC and DOE and industry experts on how the nuclear bills will help restore American nuclear leadership. For example, my legislation would align the mission of the NRC with the policy goals of the Atomic Energy Act to maximize the benefits of nuclear for general welfare. Several bills will improve the NRC licensing by creating clearer timeframes, cutting hourly fees for advanced reactors, and avoiding duplicative environmental reviews, and directing that NRC should do its work in a timely, efficient, and predictable way. Other bills seek to advance nuclear deployment at the DOE and will enable the United States to regain our global nuclear leadership. I'm proud of the bipartisan work on these 12 bills and optimistic we'll get to a place on 2 bills not listed today, which remain important priorities. Mr. Griffith's legislation would eliminate an outdated hearing requirement, NRC, which the Commission itself has said is not needed. Mr. Wahlberg's bill similarly would update NRC requirements involving an advisory committee. These are priorities that we want to continue moving through the Energy and Commerce Committee. We have repeatedly heard in this committee from the FERC commissioners, grid operators, and energy experts about our looming resource adequacy crisis. We need to take this warning seriously, and we need to do more to ensure the reliability and affordability of our electric grid and the energy system. The early retirement of baseload generation sources like nuclear and natural gas are contributing to this problem. Unrealistic policies like the EPA's Unlawful Clean Power Plant 2.0 proposal are contributing to these early retirements. My bill, which we are marking up today, the Guaranteeing Reliable Infrastructure Development, or GRID Act, would amend the Federal Power Act to require coordination between FERC and any federal agency working on a regulation that could threaten the reliability of the bulk power system. I hope that all my colleagues on this committee will join me in this important effort. We also heard at our field hearing in Moore County, North Carolina back in June, the Biden administration is pursuing new efficiency standards for transformers that will make the existing supply chain crisis even worse, putting grid reliability at risk. Congressman Hudson's bill, which we are taking up today, would prohibit the DOE from imposing new efficiency standards for distribution transformers until 5 years after the enactment of this act. This administration is using efficiency and appliance standards to pursue climate objectives over consumer choice. These standards will increase the cost of appliances and limit the availability of consumer options. Congresswoman Lesko's bill would address this issue by amending the Energy Policy and Conservation Act to prohibit DOE from prescribing any new or amended efficiency standards that are not technologically feasible and economically justifiable. It's not just home appliances that efficiency standards are targeting. The recent Biden administration energy efficiency standards target manufactured housing, making these homes less affordable. Dr. Bouchon's bill would correct course and prevent the DOE from mandating new standards for manufactured homes because they are already regulated by another federal agency, HUD. Finally, we are taking up Chair Rogers' bill, the Hydropower Clean Energy Future Act. Hydropower is the largest source of renewable energy, and this legislation will ensure this clean energy stays online, preserving the existing fleeting and paving the way to bring more hydropower online. I'm hopeful we can get bipartisan support on that bill as well. I urge my colleagues to support the legislation in front of us today to advance American energy security, reliability, and affordability. And I'll now recognize Ranking Member DeGette for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I can speak for most of us to say I'm happy that the Energy and Commerce Committee is still moving forward, as I've discussed with Chair Rogers. But unfortunately, even though we've had 3 weeks to think about all of this, many of the bills that we're considering today are just committee marks, and they haven't even been officially introduced. But even if they were officially introduced right now, they couldn't be referred to our subcommittee to be considered because we don't have a speaker. So I just want the record to reflect the House isn't currently in disarray, even though the Energy and Commerce Committee is trying our best. And the chaos is really undermining our ability to govern. But let's focus on the content of this markup, because there's some good things here. Most of these bills that we're considering here, the nuclear bills, are bipartisan, so that's really great. Secondly, we have a bipartisan bill that I'm the lead Democratic sponsor on that I'll talk about in a minute. So all in all, there are many good things about this markup, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the chair of the full committee, because as the world moves towards a clean energy transition, we have to consider legislation that allows the United States to continue on that path and helps us to continue leading the world. As we all know, nuclear energy makes up nearly 20% of the energy that we generate in the United States. It has the potential to supply a significant portion of our power as long as we continue to prioritize public health and safety. Let me say that again, as long as we continue to prioritize public health and safety. And nuclear energy is a topic some on the other side of the aisle have been surprised, but in fact, we have bipartisan support for this, and that is really important in this current climate. I'm proud of the work the subcommittee has done to come together and support the nuclear energy sector and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is vital as the leading safety regulator of nuclear energy and materials, because we also have to support their workforce. The NRC needs all available tools to ensure it has the full workforce it needs to complete its work. So that's why I'm proud of the bill I mentioned, the Strengthening NRC Workforce Act of 2023. And I also want to note, happily but sadly, this is the first Democratic-led bill being marked up in this subcommittee, this Congress. Over all the hearings and markups, I keep saying, let's do some bipartisan work, so I'm really proud of that. What the bill does, simply put, is it allows direct hiring authority for the chairman of the NRC when there are candidate shortages or when there's a critical need to fill certain positions. It also helps the NRC retain staff by increasing their compensation, among other things. The bill has been updated, as it should be, to reflect witness testimony from our hearing, and it also incorporates some provisions of the Senate version of the bill, which I'll highlight later in the markup. And so that's good news. I just want to talk very briefly about some of the bills that the majority has put forward, which were not updated to reflect our concerns. Reliable electricity is one of the most important aspects of American lives, and energy efficiency can help ensure reliability. But the bills we're talking about today are instead focused on gutting energy efficiency standards rather than improving them. They would roll back progress that we've made on energy efficiency, despite that this helps us avoid taxing our grid and also saves consumers money. So finally, we are considering Chair McMorris-Rodgers' Hydropower Clean Energy Future Act. Like regulations around nuclear energy, hydropower has had a history of bipartisan support in this committee and Congress. And in fact, the chair and I have worked together in the past on hydropower bills. We need to prioritize investment to encourage new hydropower and retain existing dams, while also ensuring that we minimize the environmental impacts. So I'm excited about the potential, but I have concerns about this specific bill. And I hope we can work together as it moves along, eventually if we get a speaker to the floor. It looks to undercut important environmental laws by creating significant exemptions for the hydropower licensing process, which is frankly not something I can get behind. And so I hope we can find common ground on this. I hope we can work together, because I think hydropower is one of the other keys to unlocking a clean energy future. And with that, I yield back.
Joan yields back. I now recognize the chair of the full committee, Chair Rogers, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I feel like I should start like the airlines do and say thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience with the delays interrupting your schedule. I know you're all very patient. I appreciate that. The Energy and Commerce Committee is at the forefront of securing America's energy dominance, encouraging innovation that produces clean, affordable, and reliable energy. And today's markup is a part of it builds on those efforts. Energy and Commerce's rich history of plowing the hard ground necessary to legislate continues today. That is the focus this afternoon as we deliver on several bipartisan wins for the American people. And I do want to thank all of the members, Ranking Member Pallone, my colleagues who are making sure that the United States continues to be #1 place for clean energy and innovation, while also taking meaningful steps to improve people's lives and reduce emissions. This is important work to help usher in the next era of U.S. energy leadership. 12 of the bills we consider will reflect bipartisan work to restore America's nuclear dominance. That was the central goal outlined in the bipartisan letter the committee sent to stakeholders this April. We all agreed that a robust and growing nuclear industry is critical for reducing emissions, providing reliable, affordable, clean energy to Americans, and for building durable economic and strategic relationships around the world, especially as the influence of China and Russia in this industry grows. Fortunately, we know our allies are eager for American leadership and technology, and our nuclear industry is ready to lead. These solutions will reform the licensing processes at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the Department of Energy to encourage innovation and enable industry to deploy safe, reliable nuclear energy. While we're still working through some of the areas of disagreement, the goal is ultimately to continue building bipartisan solutions that can advance out of committee. Other solutions today will help further strengthen reliability while also protecting people's freedom to choose which energy sources and appliances work best for their lives. The GRID Act, led by Chair Duncan, enhances interagency coordination and makes sure the policies of federal agencies, especially EPA, are prioritizing reliable, affordable power. Mr. Hudson's bill strengthens supply chains for transformers to help minimize the risk of blackouts and service disruptions and make sure new transformers are available to replace those damaged by fires and floods. We'll also consider important measures by Mrs. Lesko to ensure Americans, not the federal government, are deciding for themselves what home appliances best meet their needs. Dr. Bouchon has a related bill that reins in DOE's abuse of standards that threaten to drive up cost of manufactured housing. Finally, we will advance our bipartisan work to update the laws concerning hydropower, America's most abundant, clean, reliable, and renewable energy resource. With the policy reforms in my bill, we could double hydropower production in the United States. We need to modernize an outdated permitting process, promote next-generation hydro technologies, and eliminate barriers to new development. Our energy dominance and entrepreneurial spirit keeps our energy resources reliable and powers our way of life. For more than 100 years, generations of Americans have come to rely on clean, affordable energy, to the point that most of us don't even think about it anymore. Critical resources like electricity not only keep the lights on, but heat our homes in the cold winter months and cool them in the summer. Access to affordable energy is the reason that we have fresh produce at the grocery store. It's how we drive our kids to school. It's how we're able to stay connected to our friends and loved ones. It's fundamental to every sector of our national defense and the economy, from health to technology to banking. By continuing to embrace our abundant resources, we can raise the standard of living, drive technological progress, and improve people's health. These solutions, mostly bipartisan, will further unlock American energy and make sure people have the opportunity for a better life and an affordable energy future. Again, I thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. We're going to continue working on some of these bills, but together we are delivering the results that the hardworking people of this country are counting on us to deliver. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's now been 3 weeks since the House has been paralyzed without a speaker, and the House cannot do anything until a speaker is in place, and we're now 24 days away from another potential government shutdown. Now, last week, committee hearings were delayed for hours as Republicans held their conference, and today we see more of the same as we hold this markup in between the GOP conference meetings. And so as we prepare to mark up bills today, I just ask committee Republicans to be mindful that the only way any of these bills will ever become law is with Democratic support. And that's why it's critical that we work together in a bipartisan fashion on legislation that will move our nation forward. And bipartisan cooperation means taking the time to come to bipartisan agreement, not rushing bills to markup before they're ready. It also means that there should be more Democratic bills being considered by the committee, Right now, only Mr. Gett's bill is being considered with a Democratic lead sponsor. Now, I'd also point out that there are 27 bipartisan bills that have passed through the committee that are waiting floor action. So I would hope that once we have a speaker, these bills are prioritized for floor action with the new speaker. Today, the subcommittee is marking up 17 bills. We'll begin with 12 nuclear bills that we've been working on together to find a bipartisan path forward. The bills are largely aimed at making it easier for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to process an anticipated wave of forthcoming applications for new advanced reactor designs over the next decade. Any changes that we make must allow for the timely completion of the licensing, environmental, and safety review processes while not compromising on the NRC's vital duty to safeguard public health. I still have some concerns with some of the bills, but we are moving in the right direction. Unfortunately, that's where the bipartisanship ends. We also are considering 4 bills on efficiency and grid reliability. These bills are all partisan bills designed to limit the Department of Energy's ability to issue energy efficiency standards that help lower energy bills for American families and reduce emissions. And they're nothing more than an industry wish list. The efficiency bills weaken or remove DOE's authority to issue specific energy efficiency standards. They're adding cumbersome and duplicative requirements to the DOE rulemaking process that will delay and block standards that help Americans save money. One of the bills, the so-called Affordable Homes Act, has never been discussed at a legislative hearing, and so we have no idea what its impacts would be. And we should trust the DOE and the experts who work there to do their jobs. We should not interfere with specific standards. Republicans also want to give FERC the authority to veto other agencies' rules and actions related to the bulk power system, even though FERC says it doesn't want this authority. And finally, we'll consider Chair Rogers' hydropower bill, and I have a lot of concerns with this bill. At our legislative hearing last month, the FERC witness said that the bill would exempt roughly 80% of hydro projects from licensing. The Council on Environmental Quality witness voiced concerns that the bill's exemptions would threaten the recovery of fish populations. And we did not hear from tribes or resource agencies, which are both vital voices in this conversation. Now, the Republican majority only reached out to discuss this bill 2 days before the markup was noticed. Despite my concerns, Democrats are interested in having a conversation on a bipartisan path forward on hydropower licensing, but forcing this bill through the subcommittee today makes that conversation much harder. So let me just say, before I yield back, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that Chair Rogers, wants to have activity on the committee, both hearings and markups, while this speaker chaos continues. But I just think we have to be mindful of the fact that we have so many bills that came out of this committee bipartisan that need to move on the floor, and now we're just adding more to the list. I mean, we could end up having 50 bipartisan bills to move to the floor. And I just hope that when the speaker chaos ends, that we can work on a bipartisan basis to try to get these bills moved on the floor. Otherwise, we're just going through the motions of moving the bills with no opportunity to move them on the floor. But you've heard me say this before, and I guess I'll continue to say it again. I'm frustrated. I understand that the chair is frustrated as well. But let's work together to try to get our work done and prioritize our work when it comes to the House floor. And with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Let me just say this. I'm happy to be here with all my colleagues on the Energy Subcommittee. We may be the only subcommittee in Congress marking up bills right now. Under the leadership of Chair Rogers, we're going to do the work for the American people because it's important. It's important work. These are important bills being brought up today. Look forward to getting them all marked up. I'll remind members that pursuant to committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. Are there any further opening statements? Either side? Okay. I'll now, let's see. So the chair will call up the first bill. Since no opening statements, the chair calls up the Advanced Reactor Fee Reduction Act discussion draft and asks the clerk to report.
A bill to amend the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act to reduce regulatory costs for advanced nuclear reactor application reviews and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United
Without
States.
objection, the first reading is dispensed with. Discussion draft will now be open for any amendment at any point. So ordered. Are there bipartisan amendments? Are there any other amendments?
This is the first one, Ben.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to strike the last word on all 12 bills, just as an introductory.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the 12 nuclear bills that we have before us today. And as I said in my opening statement, these bills represent the most bipartisan activity that we've had really in a long time. We've had 2 oversight hearings and a legislative hearing on nuclear topics. Majority and minority staff have worked together where they could find a pathway forward on bills. And this is a good example of how Congress is supposed to work. And that's one of the reasons I'm disappointed in the other pieces of legislation at the markup today. But coming back to the nuclear bills, our work is still not yet done. While we have made tremendous progress since our legislative hearing in July, not all of the bills are in a perfect state. In particular, I still have lingering concerns over the bill that would alter the NRC's mission, and I think the Advancing Nuclear Regulatory Oversight Act needs clarification to ensure that Congress is not inadvertently undermining safety and the NRC's on-site inspection program. But I am confident that we can find a way to resolve these issues to the liking of both Republicans and Democrats. Our majority has made good faith efforts and negotiations so far, and that's why I'm comfortable moving these measures forward. We'll likely see more changes before any markup at the full committee, but that's how the regular order process is supposed to work. So I also specifically want to praise the inclusion of Ranking Member DeGette's bill, the strengthening of the NRC Workforce Act. Again, I only wish that the spirit of bipartisan cooperation has taken a hold here could carry through into the rest of the committee's work. But as I said, after today, the subcommittee will have marked up 29 items this Congress, and there's only one where the lead sponsor was a Democrat. So we need to see more Democratic bills. But we've made progress, and I look forward to working together to even make more progress before we head to full committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair will recognize the author of the bill, Mr. Bouchon, for 5 minutes.
I move to strike the last word to speak in support of the Advanced Reactor Fee Reduction Act.
Gentleman's recognized.
This legislation would reduce regulatory costs, specifically the licensing costs for companies seeking to license advanced reactor technologies. It would build on previous work driven by this committee's efforts to establish a regulatory framework that works for the range of new nuclear technologies our innovators are pursuing. In short, the bill amends the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act to reduce the hourly rate of fees assessed and collected by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission from applicants for pre-application activities for advanced nuclear reactor licenses. The bill requires that what these companies are charged only reflects mission direct costs for the service of reviewing the licenses. What this means in practice is that the advanced reactor applicants could be paying less than half the current $300 an hourly rate for licensing, dramatically reducing their cost by focusing just on paying for the actual license review work. This would reduce the financial barriers for new innovators that have yet to prove their designs and attract capital. It reduces the regulatory costs for future technologies, setting the stage for industry innovation and strengthening America's energy future. I urge my colleagues to support the Advanced Reactor Fee Reduction Act, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seeking recognition to speak on the bill? If not, the question now occurs on forwarding the Advanced Reactor Fee Reduction Act to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. Chair will now call up the Advanced Nuclear Reactor Prize Act discussion draft. Ask clerk to report.
A bill to authorize the Secretary of Energy to make awards to cover regulatory costs relating to licensing certain first-of-a-kind advanced
Without
nuclear...
objection, the first reading is dispensed with. The discussion draft will be open for amendments at any point, so ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Seeing none, Chair will recognize Mr. Curtis for 5 minutes to speak on the bill.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Advanced Nuclear Reactor Prize Act would authorize the Secretary of Energy to make targeted awards to cover fees assessed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for first technologies that are licensed and made operational in 5 unique categories. Awards under the bill cannot exceed total amounts expended by the eligible entity, excluding other federal support. The prizes will incentivize innovation and quality applications, ultimately making it more affordable for first-of-kind technology to get through the licensing process. The draft was updated from the legislative hearing to ensure Tennessee Valley Authority eligibility with underlying law and also conform to Senate language for this provision. I urge the support of the Advanced Nuclear Reactor Prize Act and yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman yields back. Are there any other members seeking recognition to speak on the bill? Seeing none, the question now occurs on forwarding the Advanced Nuclear Reactor Prize Act to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill is agreed to. The chair now calls up the Nuclear for Brownfields Site Preparation Act discussion draft and asks the clerk to report.
A bill to enable timely licensing reviews for nuclear reactor facilities at brownfield sites and retired fossil fuel sites.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with and discussion draft be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Seeing no amendments, the chair will recognize Mr. Guthrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the time. I want to speak in support of the discussion draft for the nuclear Brownsville site. I have the privilege of representing some Western Kentucky coal communities, including Muhlenberg, McLean, and Ohio counties. Unfortunately, regulations implemented during the Obama administration caused coal production to decline and forced the closure of coal-fired power plants, taking with them good-paying jobs and caused a ripple effect across these communities, the Commonwealth, and our nation. Nuclear energy is a potential way to use one of Kentucky's greatest assets, our experienced energy workers residing in these communities, and continue Kentucky's leadership as an energy producer to improve reliability of our grid. However, as power providers in my district and other parts of Kentucky have started to explore nuclear power, they are running into significant barriers. Estimates to get a new reactor online are quoted around 10 years or longer. We have an opportunity to use brownfield sites like former coal-fired plants and other sites as possible locations for nuclear power plants. Specifically, my bill would direct the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to identify and support and report on regulations, guidance, or policy necessary to license and oversee nuclear facilities at brownfield sites and other sites with retired fossil fuel facilities. The NRC would consider how existing site infrastructure can be reused in early site permits, plant parameter envelopes, and standardized applications for similar sites may be used for licensing. This draft also reflects changes made in response to Representative Tonko's constructive comments at the legislative hearing. So I want to thank Representative Tonko for his feedback. I'm committed to making sure we have affordable, reliable energy from a diverse energy portfolio while empowering communities who powered our nation for generations to get back in the game with good-paying jobs that will keep the lights on for years to come. Thanks, Chairman Duncan, for including this in today's markup, and I will yield my time.
Gentleman yields back. For purpose of Mr. Tonko, seek recognition.
Mr. Chair, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, at the legislative hearing, we heard testimony on this discussion draft from witnesses invited by both sides of the aisle on the potential and the possibilities that would come from licensing nuclear facilities at brownfields and former fossil fuel sites. As a ranking member of the Environment Subcommittee, I know this committee has a long bipartisan history of promoting community revitalization by supporting the remediation of brownfields and getting those properties back to productive use. So I certainly believe that these sites present interesting opportunities to be repurposed for clean energy, including potentially for advanced nuclear projects. However, in July, I expressed some concerns that, as then drafted, the definition of brownfield used in the bill would not cover many former fossil fuel sites, such as coal plants. CERCLA's brownfield definition is precise and excludes coal plants for good reason, so polluters cannot gain access to limited brownfield funds to carry out remediation required by their permits. I am pleased to see that the version before us today has addressed this issue so that fossil fuel sites that are excluded from EPA's definition of a brownfield site are now explicitly covered by this bill. I do thank Mr. Guthrie and the majority staff for working with the minority staff to look into this issue. And I would point out that this is the benefit of regular order. It lets legislation stand up to scrutiny, and the bills that emerge are the better for it. If the committee were able to proceed like this with all of our bills, The resulting products would be much stronger. So I thank you again, Mr. Chair, and this is a worthy idea, and I encourage members to support this bill. With that, I yield back.
Chairman yields back. Does any other member seek recognition on the bill? If not, I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. Move to strike last word. This is a good approach to a great issue, and I want to thank the sponsor of the bill. I support it completely, and I would actually love to see more on this issue in Congress with brownfield sites in general. So I support the bill. Any other members seeking recognition on the bill? If not, the question now occurs on forwarding the Nuclear Brownfield Site Preparation Act to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill is agreed to. And the chair will now call up the Strengthening American Nuclear Competitiveness Act discussion draft and ask the clerk to report.
A bill to assess and improve the competitiveness of United States nuclear commerce, to expedite Department of Energy review of certain nuclear technology.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with and discussion draft be open for amendments at any time. So ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Seeing no amendments, any member seeking recognition speak on the bill. Mr. Johnson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to strike the last word in support of the Strengthening American Nuclear Competitiveness Act.
Gentleman is recognized.
I won't use all my time here because we went over this legislation and others in the nuclear-focused legislative hearing this past summer. But I do want to thank our team, the committee staff, for doing some great work on this legislation since then. The reason this legislation is so important is because nuclear technology, like many other technology sectors, is rapidly advancing. In the hearings this summer, we talked to DOE and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission witnesses about this. We made it clear they have to be ready. It's imperative that as policymakers, we need to not only empower friendly nations to invest in commercial nuclear technology here in the U.S., but we also want to enable American nuclear entrepreneurs to compete safely and effectively around the globe. Civilian nuclear projects in emerging countries, for example, are a 100-year commitment, a century-long presence. Our adversaries certainly know this. So we must put America at the global head of the table in civilian nuclear technology, because if we don't, and we aren't, China and Russia are going to fill that void. That said, we've seen some good engagement, including some from our Democrat colleagues on this committee, technical assistance from outside stakeholders, and the Department of Energy. So this legislation, I believe, is ready for prime time. We have a few changes in response to the technical assistance we received to update our approach to improving technology imports. The new provisions require the Energy Secretary to identify factors other than agreements under Section 123 of the Atomic Energy Act that may be used to determine a country's status as to whether that country is generally authorized to receive unclassified nuclear technology and assistance under the Department of Energy's export regulations, and to update the department's list of generally authorized countries at least every 5 years. Additionally, the bill would remove restrictions on investments in U.S. nuclear technology by certain foreign allies and companies incorporated within those allied countries, with the exception of any country that is being sanctioned. The removal would not affect security and non-proliferation controls. Next, we extend Price-Anderson liability protections out to 2065. Both outside stakeholders and regulators have agreed that this is absolutely critical to have a functioning and growing nuclear industry here and abroad. And a couple of final provisions. I've taken a particular interest in these, given some of our other work on this subcommittee and my Environment, Manufacturing, and Critical Materials Subcommittee as well, specifically on the manufacturing and supply chain side of our work. My legislation requires the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to submit 2 different reports, one on how to best prepare for and properly regulate advanced manufacturing techniques to build new nuclear reactors more cost effectively. And the other is a report on the regulatory path forward for non-electric uses of nuclear power.
We discussed this last week, but America needs a lot more power. Perhaps one day, we could see advanced small modular nuclear reactors powering huge industrial facilities, carbon emission free, by the way, taking some strain off our power grid. I'll be following this closely, but as policymakers, we need to make sure the regulators who we have oversight over are ready for this. With that, I urge my colleagues on both sides to support this legislation, and I'll yield the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seeking recognition on the bill? Seeing none, the question now occurs on forwarding Strengthening American Nuclear Competitiveness Act to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill is agreed to. Chair will now call up the NRC Mission Alignment Act discussion draft and ask the clerk to report.
A bill to direct the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to update the mission statement of the commission to ensure licensing and regulation is efficient and is in alignment with the policy stated in the
Without
atomic...
objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the discussion draft be open for amendments at any point. So ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Seeing none, any member wishing to seek recognition on the bill? Seeing none, I'll recognize myself. I move to strike last word and speak in support of the bill. Gentlemen's recognized. This is my bill, the NRC Mission Alignment Act. The Atomic Energy Act of 1954 established the national policy that the use of civilian nuclear energy shall be directed to make the maximum contribution to the general welfare. This bill addresses concerns raised by stakeholders, even the nuclear regulatory commissioners, that the NRC must conduct its important safety mission in service to the broader goals of the Atomic Energy Act. NRC Chairman Hansen has stated that the NRC must do its best not to be an impediment to the innovation and deployment. We want the culture of the NRC to embrace a mission that focuses on safety and reflects the purpose of the Atomic Energy Act. NRC Mission Alignment Act directs NRC to update its mission statement to include that its licensing and regulation of nuclear energy activities will be conducted in a manner that is efficient and does not unnecessarily limit the potential of nuclear energy to improve the general welfare and benefits of nuclear technology for society. These essential parts of the existing mission would continue. These are to provide reasonable assurance of adequate protection of public health and safety, to promote common defense and security, and to protect the environment. With this change, focused commission leadership can drive an efficient mission with broader sense of purpose and the work that it does. The bill also drives efficiency by amending the NRC's organizing statute to require the NRC's Director of Nuclear Reactor Regulation take actions to support efficient, timely, and predictable reviews and license applications. Combined, these provisions will help set up the NRC for more timely and efficient work and build on work of other pieces of our reform package, and I urge my colleagues to support this important piece of legislation. Are there any other members that seek recognition? If not, the question now occurs on forwarding the NRC Mission Alignment Act to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The bill is agreed to and is forwarded to the full committee. The chair now calls up the Nuclear Licensing Efficiency Act discussion draft and asks the clerk to report.
A bill to streamline nuclear technology regulatory permitting and licensing and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with. Discussion draft be open for amendments at any point. So ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Seeing none, any members seeking recognition on the bill? Mr. Balderson is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word and speak in support of the Nuclear Licensing Efficiency Act.
Gentleman is recognized. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for including this bill, which is being led by Mr. Allen from Georgia. This bill makes practical improvements to key laws outlining how NRC licensed nuclear technology, especially the new advanced reactors. The bill amends the Atomic Energy Act to require that the NRC provide efficient, timely, and predictable reviews and proceedings for licensing and for the modification of its rules and regulations. This is simple, but important change ensures that essential safety work can be completed without impeding the tremendous benefits of nuclear technology. It reflects an important provision that stakeholders across the board desperately need: timely, efficient, and clear rules and regulations that are understandable, not uncertain. This bill also amends the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, or NEMA, to require the NRC to regularly review, assess, and revise licensing performances, metrics, and milestone schedules required under NEMA to provide the most efficient metrics and schedules reasonably achievable. These provisions and other changes will focus the agency on getting its new regulations for advanced reactors ready. Just a few months ago, I visited the Department of Energy's Piketon facility in southern Ohio, which will soon be the site of 2 new microreactors. It's imperative that the NRC's licensing process ensures the United States can take advantage of these new technologies. Combined, these provisions build on the work of other pieces of our reform package we are considering today and deserve broad support. I urge members to support this bill. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seeking recognition on the bill? I recognize myself, move to strike last word, and recognize speak in favor of the bill. So efficiency should be the standard. And we've been doing nuclear energy production in this country for 60-plus years safely. And NRC, other regulatory agencies should be efficient. So I would encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I'll yield back. Any other members seeking recognition? Seeing none, the question now occurs on forwarding the Nuclear Licensing Efficiency Act to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. The chair will now call up the Advanced Nuclear Deployment Act discussion draft and ask clerk to report.
A bill to facilitate the efficient licensing and deployment of advanced civilian nuclear technologies. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and discussion draft be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments on the bill? Seeing none, any member seeking a recognition? Mr. Pence is recognized.
Chairman Duncan, I move strike the last word. In support of the Advanced Nuclear Deployment Act being led by my colleague Congressman Hudson. This Advanced Nuclear Deployment Act will help bring cost-effective deployment of next-generation nuclear and lay important groundwork for microreactors. First, this bill makes it easier for pre-application and siting work for demonstration projects now underway at the Department of Energy. This bill amends the Nuclear Energy Innovation Modernization Act to authorize funding that supports early site permitting and pre-application activities for advanced reactors located at DOE and critical national infrastructure sites. These activities would be excluded from the NRC fee recovery requirements. Second, this bill would direct NRC to identify and implement regulatory guidance or, as necessary, issue regulations for licensing issues concerning microreactors. Microreactors, which are smaller than 20 megawatts, are ideal for critical national infrastructure deployment. This bill would also require NRC to establish procedures to ensure that licensing decisions to construct and operate new reactors using previously licensed designs and sited on or adjacent to existing sites with nuclear facilities would to be made within 25 months. Finally, this bill creates a pilot program to authorize the Secretary of Energy to enter into a power purchase agreement of up to 40 years for new nuclear reactors. This program will have a priority for advanced nuclear reactors that provide power to high-value assets or to increase energy security in remote locations. I urge support of the Advanced Nuclear Deployment Act, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seeking recognition? Seeing none, the question now occurs on forwarding the Advanced Nuclear Deployment Act to the full committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. The chair will now call up the Modernize Nuclear Reactor Environmental Reviews Act discussion draft. Ask clerk to report.
A bill to direct the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to submit a report and conduct a rulemaking on facilitating efficient, timely environmental reviews of
Without
nuclear.
objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and discussion draft will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Are there any bipartisan amendments? Any other amendments? Any members seeking recognition on the bill? Mr. Weber is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for yielding, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that the committee is considering my bill, the Modernized Nuclear Reactor Environmental Reviews Act. This straightforward legislation is designed to cut through the red tape at the NRC and accelerate the environmental review process for nuclear reactor applications. As we all know from the work this committee has done so far, this Congress, the environmental review processes across the board take far too long due to unnecessary duplication as well as outdated bureaucratic practices. The Modernized Nuclear Reaction Environmental Reviews Act directs the NRC to take a hard look at the ways to actually add efficiency to the environmental review process through a number of reforms. It seeks NRC to review and revise its rules on several key areas. Number one, to expand the use of categorical exclusions. Categorical exclusions can be used when an agency has determined that the project does not have a significant impact on the environment. Through these exclusions, environmental assessments and environmental impact statements are not typically required. This significantly reduces the time, money, as well as the paperwork. Number two, to expand the use of environmental assessments. Environmental assessments are far quicker to compile than environmental impact statements and will actually expedite the environmental review process, especially for small reactor designs that have limited risk beyond the fence line. Number three, to expand the use of generic environmental impact statements, EIS. Additionally, this legislation directs review by NRC to use an applicant's EIS as the NRC's draft EIS, saving substantial resources for the Commission. Number four, to empower the NRC to coordinate these efforts with other federal agencies. What a thought. Number five, to modernize the systems to allow applicants to use online portals to work in real time with the NRC and cooperating agencies. These common sense updates will not only equip the NRC to cut down on duplicative efforts and speed up their work, but also to set up our nation to expand our nuclear fleet. Nuclear is clean, safe, and plays a critical role in putting reliable as well as dispatchable energy on the grid. These reforms should be welcomed by all who want a more efficient review process. Actually, it'll be a more efficient energy and grid system as well. I urge support for my bill, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seeking recognition? Seeing none, the question now occurs on forwarding the Modernized Nuclear Reactor Environmental Reviews Act as amended. It's not amended to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Depending on the chair, the ayes have it. Chair will now call up Advancing Nuclear Regulatory Oversight Act, discussion draft. Ask clerk to report.
A bill to update oversight and inspection practices of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with. The discussion draft be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. Any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Any members seeking recognition on the bill? Ms. Lesko is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to strike the last word and explain my bill.
General Lay is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am pleased to introduce the Advancing Nuclear Regulatory Oversight Act. This bill requires the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, to assess and implement improvements to its oversight and inspection practices. As I've told this committee before, located just outside of my district is Palo Verde Nuclear Plant, which is the largest net-producing nuclear plant in the nation. I believe there is a lot of value in having on-site inspectors at each plant. They provide a very important and valuable service. I also believe improvements in the inspection process can be made. My bill requires the NRC to produce 3 reports for this committee detailing how to improve regulatory oversight. Report number 1 would analyze lessons learned from COVID-19 emergency, discuss lessons learned from the crisis, and if any lessons can be applied on a permanent basis. Report number 2 would assess specific elements of oversight and inspections that can be modified using technology, improved planning, and continually updated risk-informed performance-based assessment. Report number 3 would review office and facility space requirements of the NRC. Hopefully, these reports are the starting point to modernize, reduce unnecessary costs, and overall improve certain NRC processes while at the same time maintaining their excellent safety record. I ask my colleagues to vote yes on this bill, and I yield back.
Joan Lee yields back. Any other members seeking recognition? Seeing none, the question now occurs on forwarding the Advancing Nuclear Regulatory Oversight Act to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The opinion of the chair is I have it, and the bill is agreed to. Chair will now call up H.R. 995 and ask clerk to report.
H.R. 995, a bill to direct the Secretary of Energy to conduct a study on the global status of the civilian nuclear energy industry and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. Are there bipartisan amendments to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Mr. Peters recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you.
Clerk will read the amendment. Sorry.
Could the gentleman specify?
It is the amendment, amendment to 995 MA1.
Amendment to H.R. 995, offered by Representative Peters. Page 3, line 6, insert and security before
Without
efforts.
objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. The gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking today to offer an amendment and to speak in favor of H.R. 995, the Global Nuclear Energy Assessment and Cooperation Act that I co-lead with the bill's sponsor, Mr. Carter of Georgia. Nuclear energy will be essential to a clean, resilient electric grid. It helps provide reliable power to Americans and represents the largest source of zero-carbon electricity in the United States today. Recognizing these benefits, our bill bolsters the United States nuclear energy sector while inhibiting our adversaries' nuclear capabilities, including particularly both Russia and China. The bill will help continue our clean energy leadership and ensure that we remain the world's leading developer of nuclear energy. Specifically, the bill will provide better international cooperation and assistance related to nuclear reactors, helps build nuclear regulatory organizations or legal frameworks in other nations, and builds up the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's international efforts by facilitating the issuing of licenses to import or export nuclear reactors. My amendment provides some simple technical changes to the bill in response to feedback from key stakeholders, including the NRC and the Department of Energy. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you in particular for these bills. This is good bipartisan work on the nuclear power sector, and I appreciate your work and look forward to working with you in the future. Urge my colleagues to support the amendment and the underlying bill, and I yield back.
Any other discussion on the amendment? If not, the vote will occur on the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. And the amendment is agreed to. Any other amendments to be offered on the bill? Seeing none, now it's open for discussion. Any member seeking to be recognized? If not, I'll recognize myself, move to strike last word, and recognize myself for 5 minutes. I speak in support of H.R. 995, which is being led by Mr. Carter and Mr. Peters. Most of the reforms in the bills today focus on improvements to NRC and how it performs its important work to provide the reasonable assurance of adequate safety in nuclear activities. This bill looks outward. It focuses more on the role of the United States nuclear technologies for our geostrategic interests and how the NRC and the DOE can advance American nuclear technology and nuclear security abroad. This bill directs the Secretary of Energy to conduct a comprehensive study of the global status of civilian nuclear energy and supply chains and to recommend measures, 1, to increase the role of U.S. nuclear energy strategic energy policy, to remove barriers to develop the development of U.S. supply chains, and to align nuclear energy with national security objectives and mitigate foreign competitor strategic use of civil nuclear geopolitical purposes. Well, that's a lot of words, isn't it? It directs the Secretary to establish a program to promote the U.S. safety standards, technology, and expertise through training with foreign allies and establishes a new program at NRC to coordinate export and innovation activities. In light of adversarial competition from Russia and China, it's important to maintain our supply chains. Given this bill also requires NRC denial of licenses to possess or own nuclear fuel assemblies fabricated by Russia or China-owned and controlled facilities if they pose a threat to national economic security of the United States. We should not let our fuel fabrication, which is presently secure, someday fall under control of China or Russia. So I urge support of H.R. 995 as amended. I support the amendment that had been agreed to, and I hope my colleagues will support the legislation. Mr. Cardenas is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to apologize to you as I was trying to get a little bit more clarity about this discussion draft process, and I'm glad to see that the bipartisan effort for us to work together across the aisle, et cetera. But the fact that these are discussion drafts, I hope and pray that in the future we minimize the amount of activity within subcommittee on discussion drafts, because the level of transparency to the public and to each other isn't as transparent as when we are taking up an actual bill rather than a discussion draft. Again, it's not an objection. I just wanted to clarify for the public that hopefully we will minimize the discussion draft hearings and in the future and discuss actual bills. But again, I'm glad to see that we are have such faith in each other, even though the transparency isn't as full as discussing bills. As you can see, it looks like we're on our way to approving many discussion draft bills today in a bipartisan way, and also bills themselves. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding.
I thank the gentleman. Any other discussion on the bill before us? If not, the question now occurs on forwarding H.R. 995 to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. The chair now calls up H.R. 5718. Ask the clerk to report.
H.R. 5718, a bill to require the Secretary of Energy to establish a nuclear fuel security program, expand the American Assured Fuel Supply Program, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with. The bill is open for amendment at any point. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Seeing none, any member seeking recognition? Mr. Ladd is recognized.
Strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you holding today's markup on my legislation, H.R. 5718, the Nuclear Fuel Security Act. I'm proud to lead this legislation with the gentleman from South Carolina, the former House Democratic Whip. I also appreciate the support from the gentleman from Ohio's 12th District and the gentlelady from New Hampshire's 2nd District for their original co-sponsorship of this legislation. For too long, the United States has neglected to invest in its domestic nuclear industry. We previously led the world in nuclear innovation. Now we have grown too reliant on foreign nations like Russia for our nuclear fuels. This is especially true when it comes to the high-assay, low-enriched uranium HALEU, which is required to fuel the advanced nuclear reactors that are under development by American innovators. This represents a threat to our energy security and our national security. If we're going to continue to grow our economy, while we also are trying to reduce carbon emissions, we need to rebuild our nuclear fuel supply chain. That is why I've introduced the Nuclear Fuel Security Act, which will do three things. First, it will establish the Nuclear Fuel Security Program to increase the quantity of HALEU, and if determined to be necessary after completion of the market evaluation, low-enriched uranium LEU produced by U.S. nuclear energy companies. Second, it will expand the American Assured Fuel Supply Program to ensure the availability of domestically produced, converted, and enriched uranium in the event of a supply disruption. And third, it would establish the HALEU for Advanced Nuclear Reactor Demonstration Projects program to maximize the potential for the U.S. Department of Energy to meet the needs and schedules of advanced nuclear reactor developers until such time the commercial enrichment and deconversion capability of HALEU exists in the United States at a scale sufficient to meet future needs. If necessary, the U.S. can partner with the countries that are allies or partners to meet those needs and schedules until that time. It is critical that we take action to reinvest in our domestic nuclear energy capabilities, and it begins with shoring up our domestic uranium mining, production, enrichment, and conversion capability. The updated Nuclear Fuel Security Act, which reflects feedback we received from industry and other stakeholders, will put us back on the right path. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
John yields back. Any further discussion? Mr. Pallone is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say I'm glad to see the Nuclear Fuel Security Act added to today's agenda. I'm especially glad to see that our Republicans are supporting it. Back in May, when the committee was voting on the Russian uranium ban, I offered an amendment that would have added nearly identical language to Mr. Latta's, from his bill. But unfortunately, in both the subcommittee and full committee markups, Republicans voted against my amendment. So right now, there's only a single uranium enrichment facility operating in the U.S. and can only support roughly 1/3 of our civilian nuclear fleet's enriched uranium needs. There are 0 uranium conversion facilities currently operating in the U.S., meaning we have to import every single kilogram of uranium we enrich. So simply put, right now we lack the vital infrastructure to ban all Russian uranium imports overnight without doing horrendous damage to our nation's nuclear industry. So this bill would create programs within the DOE to ensure the supply of low-enriched uranium that our current reactors need and the supply of high-assay, low-enriched uranium that our future reactors will need. This bill is vital to U.S. energy security, and I urge members of the subcommittee to support it, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman yields back. Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, the question now occurs on forwarding H.R. 5718 to the full committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Independent of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is agreed to. The chair will now call up H.R. 4528 and ask clerk to report.
H.R. 4528, a bill to amend the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 to address the insufficient compensation and recruitment of employees and other personnel of the nuclear
Without objection,
regulatory.
the first reading is dispensed with. The bill will be open for amendment at any point. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Seeing none, any member seeking recognition, the chair will recognize Mr. Gett for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman, and I also do have a Ains at the desk, too. I have an amendment. This bill, the Strengthening the NRC Workforce Act, recognizes that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's work is built on its workforce. And that's a workforce that's coming under tremendous pressure just a few years before we think it will become more important than ever. When the NRC's chairman came before this subcommittee in June to testify, he mentioned that 1/3 of NRC's staff is currently eligible for retirement. So think about that. Our nation's nuclear regulator could lose 1/3 of its staff, the most experienced staff, overnight. And this isn't hypothetical either. According to information that was shared by the NRC in a June briefing, a full 41% of the Commission's workforce is considering leaving their roles within the next year. NRC staff identified compensation as one of the biggest reasons that employees are choosing to leave the agency, and that's taking a real toll. In 2022, the NRC was 23% smaller than it was 6 years prior. Now, maybe that made sense in a world where the NRC's workload was decreasing, but here we all are today with all of these 17 bipartisan bills talking about how we hope and expect that the NRC's workload will drastically increase over the next decade with small modular reactors using new technologies applying for their first licenses. So the reality is, if we want this to happen, if we want the NRC to be able to process the licenses in an expeditious manner, as many of the other bills we have here in the markup do just that, then we have to allow the agency to invest in and build up its workforce. And it needs to make those investments at the same time that the Commission is seeing fierce competition for nuclear professionals as the new nuclear energies try to hire up. So this bill does 3 things. Number one, it grants the NRC direct hire authority, allowing them to sidestep a sometimes cumbersome federal hiring process for certain employees. Number two, it lets the NRC establish its own pay scheme for certain employees, ensuring that the agency can not only attract but retain necessary talent, mirroring similar authority that former Representative Pete Olson worked to give FERC 3 years ago. And also, number three, it would allow the NRC to offer hiring and performance bonuses necessary to both attract and retain its workforce. Now, this would only apply to employees performing highly specialized and skilled work, which is the most important employees for the agency to keep. And so, as many of my colleagues know, the Senate NDAA included a provision similar to this bill. I was pleased to see the support it saw in the Senate, and I hope we can agree in the House that we need to make sure the NRC is properly staffed and equipped to deal with the coming wave of new reactor applications, and it's vitally important. Now, let me just talk very briefly about the amendment in the nature of a substitute. The amendment includes several changes that are meant to strengthen the bill. Some of these changes came from the majority, some came from the testimony that were heard in July, and some came from the provisions that the Senate passed in the NDAA. These changes add necessary guardrails to the bill to insulate these additional powers for the NRC from any political interference. It also allows the NRC additional flexibility to create term-limited positions and ensures that the direct hire authority will apply to entry and mid and senior level positions to ensure that this doesn't overweigh the NRC at the top. Finally, it also includes a number of transparency provisions designed to guarantee that the NRC's use of and future needs for the new authorities are crystal clear to Congress. I want to thank the majority for working with me on this. I think this is a great bill, and the AINS helps it even more, and with that, I yield back.
Joan Lay has offered an amendment in the nature of substitute. I'm going to ask clerk to report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4528, offered by Ms. Dingell of Colorado.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and anyone wishing to speak on the amendment, Ms. Dingell already has, and so I'll now recognize Mr. Wahlberg for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to strike the last word and speak in support of the AINS by Ranking Member Dingell. I appreciate the underlying goals of H.R. 4528 to ensure the NRC has the critical workforce to help the Commission meet its important mission. However, we have had some concerns about the initial approach. For example, as drafted, there's no cap on the total compensation that can be offered or the number of staff who can receive an enhanced salary or retention benefits. These issues need to be addressed if we want to move forward with this policy. And H.R. 4528 also kept appointment decisions at chairman level and does not address potential urgent hiring needs at all levels of the Commission. The AINS makes some positive changes that I support. It delegates the appointment and hiring authority to the NRC Executive Director of Operations, who is the appropriate staffer for making appointment and hiring decisions. Secondly, it broadens the focus on critical hiring if there are severe shortages at all entry and mid-level hirees in the Commission. And thirdly, it maintains a certification that focuses on efficient, timely performance so Congress can hold the Commission accountable. With agreement to continue to work with the majority to address other problems, I will support this AINS. I appreciate Ranking Member Dingell's interest in working with us to advance policies that work for more timely, efficient licensing and to improve the performance of NRC, and urge support for this AINS, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other member wishing to seek recognition on the AINS? Seeing none, the vote now occurs on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Any other member seeking recognition to speak on the bill as amended? I recognize myself for 5 minutes, move to strike last word, and recognize myself. I support this legislation. I think it's the right thing. I think workforce training is important, especially in the field of nuclear. I appreciate the work that's been put in on both sides of the aisle by Ranking Member Dingell and Mr. Wahlberg. I'd urge my colleagues to support the bill as amended. And so the question now occurs on forwarding H.R. 4528 as amended to the full committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Chair will now call up H.R. 4167. Ask the clerk to report.
H.R. 4167, a bill to prohibit the Secretary of Energy from changing energy conservation standards for distribution transformers for a certain period and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with. The bill will be open for amendment at any point. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Seeing no amendments, any member seeking recognition on the bill?
Schreier has an amendment.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Balderson first and then come to Ms. Schreier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to strike the last word and speak in support of H.R. 4167.
Gentleman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. This bill introduced by Congressman Hudson of North Carolina would prohibit the Department of Energy from imposing their efficiency standards for distribution transformers until 5 years after the bill is enacted. This committee held a field hearing in Moore, North Carolina in June of this year. We learned how these new efficiency standards put energy reliability at risk without having much impact on efficiency. The department already requires the distribution transformers be manufactured at incredibly high efficiency standards. Under Congressman Hudson's bill, these current standards for distribution transformers would remain in effect. While the department's proposed rulemaking will change the efficiency by a fraction of a percentage point, it would completely upend the production and supply chain of distribution transformers. The rulemaking would set standards that would require the material used in distribution transformers to be changed from grain-oriented electric steel GOES to an amorphous steel, which is currently less than 5% of the distribution transformers. This would halt current investment in the production of transformers and worsen the already lengthy backlog of orders. Since the pandemic, average lead times for new distribution transformers have grown significantly. We've heard from stakeholders across the supply chain that the department's proposal would impose significant costs and burdens and further delay the delivery and production of these critical products. Our grid reliability is threatened by the distribution transformer supply shortage, and the Biden administration's proposal only makes it worse. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of this bill and urge all of my colleagues to support H.R. 4167 to reduce the cost of homes and ensure the reliability of our grid. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I'll now recognize Ms. Schreier. 5 minutes. Oh, Mr. Pallone. Okay, Mr. Pallone's recognized.
Thank you. I move to strike the last word, and I want to speak in opposition to the bill. Despite the name, this bill has nothing to do with the distribution transformer supply chain. It is, however, part of the Republican attack we're seeing today on energy efficiency standards. 30 years ago, Congress passed the Bipartisan Energy Policy Act of '92, which required DOE to create and finalize efficiency standards for distribution transformers. It also required DOE to review its transformer efficiency standards once every 6 years. And this is not a suggestion, it's a requirement in the law. And yet the Trump administration ignored that requirement, blowing past the 2019 deadline to re-examine transformer efficiency standards. DOE was taken to court over this and was given a deadline of next June to decide whether or not to update its transformer efficiency standards. And this bill will get in the way of allowing DOE to do its job and bar DOE from finalizing standards, even if DOE finds that those standards will save Americans money and decrease their energy usage. And make no mistake, the draft standards that DOE published in December save Americans money. It would save Americans roughly $15 billion after it goes into effect. And DOE is now hard at work deciding whether or not it needs to finalize a new standard and whether those standards would be technologically feasible and economically justified, the criteria we've already established in law. So energy efficiency used to be a bipartisan issue in Congress, and Republicans used to support lowering energy bills for Americans. So it's unfortunate that those days seem to be behind us now. So I urge opposition to this bill, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seeking recognition? Ms. Schreier is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is to speak about my amendment, FCN 03. As I focus on, in my remarks during last month's legislative hearing, a lack of access.
Gentleman, you have an amendment to offer? You have an amendment at the desk?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Okay. I'll let the clerk report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 4167. Add at the end of the following.
Reading the amendments dispense with and without objection. Now I recognize Ms. Schreier to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I focused on in my remarks during last month's legislative hearing, a lack of access to transformers has forced utilities to delay or even cancel projects, hampering opportunities for economic growth. And that includes residential and commercial pursuits like new affordable housing or clean energy projects, It also makes our existing infrastructure vulnerable in the case of storms or wildfires. It even impacts our ability to establish the network of EV charging stations needed to support this transition to broader electric vehicle adoption. Now, I share very serious concerns with the currently proposed rule from the Department of Energy on distribution transformers. If the proposed rule is adopted as written, this could have clearly harmful impacts to our supply chain and grid reliability. So it's essential that DOE implement a rule with more reasonable standard for energy efficiency and a longer timeline than currently proposed. So from our hearing in September, I know that DOE is actively working with industry partners on this to ensure that domestic production is not hindered. And I am confident that there is a balance here that can cut costs for consumers without exacerbating the current transformer shortage. I'll be watching to see how Department of Energy implements the final rule and look forward to working with industry partners to alleviate this crisis. That being said, passing a blanket ban and preventing the DOE from doing any work on this for 5 years undercuts the Department of Energy's important work in economic and feasibility analysis. It disincentivizes their efforts to collaborate with industry in search of a rule that accomplishes both grid reliability and affordability. And importantly, it does nothing to actually address the underlying supply chain problems from the current predicament. So that's why I'm offering my amendment to the current bill that would give domestic manufacturers access to financial and technical assistance to help address the distribution transformer shortage. Let's give manufacturers the proper tools they need to boost domestic production. I urge my colleagues to vote for this amendment, and I yield back.
Chair yields back. Any further discussion on the amendment? Mr. Balderson, for purpose you seek recognition.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to strike the last word to speak in opposition to this amendment.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment will require the Department of Energy to carry out a duplicative program to provide financial and technical assistance for transformers, grid components, and electric steel. Unfortunately, the amendment isn't clear on specifics. It's unclear how much funding would be spent on the program, what assistance will be provided, or when this will ever happen. What is clear is if the department's standards go into effect, it will be the end of the domestic production of electrical steel in the United States. The last remaining domestic producer of electrical steel, which is produced in my district, has said if DOE's proposal is implemented, production of GOES and NOES would be completely unsustainable and they would be forced to discontinue their production of electrical steel completely, which is also used for power transformers and electrical vehicles. American businesses are not asking for another spending program or a bailout. They need the government to get out of their way. And if my colleagues are serious about supporting the domestic production of distribution transformers, grid components, and electric steel, I'd strongly encourage them to support the underlying bill and oppose the Department of Energy's proposed standards. The solution here isn't to spend more money, which is fueling inflation and driving up the cost of all goods and services across the economy. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the amendment? Mr. Pallone's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word and speak in support of Representative Schreier's amendment. This amendment would actually allow the bill to live up to its name and do something about the shortage of distribution transformers that is hurting utilities across the country. The Biden administration and congressional Democrats have been hard at work trying to solve supply chain issues for distribution transformers. Last year, President Biden formally invoked the Defense Production Act to increase the domestic production of distribution transformers, and last year's appropriations law provided DOE with nearly $28 million for research into transformers to help ease the supply chain issues, funding that Republicans are aiming to cut in their extreme spending bills. In September, the subcommittee heard testimony from DOE Assistant Secretary Gene Rodriguez on all the activities that the department is working on to help distribution transformer supply chains. This includes coordinating with not only transformer manufacturers, but utilities and the two companies that make the only electrical steel that is made in the U.S. But the reality is that if we really want DOE to be able to solve this issue, it needs additional authorities to provide financial and technical assistance in order to boost the domestic production of distribution transformers and other grid components. And that's the real way out of this situation. And I hope our Republican colleagues can join with us in actually addressing the root cause of transformer supply chain issues instead of just complaining about hypothetical future rules that won't go into effect for 4 more years. And so I urge support for Representative Shire's amendment, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the amendment? A roll call has been requested, so the clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Latta. Latta votes no. Guthrie. Guthrie votes no. Griffith. Griffith votes no. Johnson. Johnson votes no. Bouchon. Bouchon votes no. Wahlberg. Palmer. Palmer votes no. Curtis. Curtis votes no. Lesko. Lesko votes no. Pence. Pence votes no. Armstrong. Armstrong votes no. Weber. Weber votes no. Balderson. Balderson votes no. Pfluger. Pfluger votes no. Duncan. Duncan votes no. DeGette. DeGette votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Fletcher. Fletcher votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Vesey. Vesey votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Rogers. Rogers votes no.
Clerk will report the result. Is there any member not recorded?
Mr. Wahlberg is not recorded. Mr. Wahlberg votes no. Mr. Burgess is not recorded. Mr. Burgess votes no.
Any other member not recorded? Clerk will report the result.
Chair Duncan, on that vote, there were 13 ayes and 17 noes.
The amendment is not adopted. And now the pending question is on forwarding H.R. 4167 to the full committee. A roll call has been requested, so the clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Bouchon votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. DeGette. DeGette votes no. Peters. Peters votes no. Fletcher. Fletcher votes no. Matsui. Matsui votes no. Tonko.
No.
Tonko votes no. Vesey. Vesey votes no. Custer. Custer votes no. Schreier. Schreier votes no. Castor. Castor votes no. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes no. Cardenas. Cardenas votes no. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes no. Pallone. Pallone votes no. Rogers. Rogers votes aye.
Are the members not recorded? Clerk will report the totals.
Chair Duncan, on that vote, there were 17 ayes and 13 noes.
And the bill is agreed to and be forwarded to the full committee. We're going to stand in recess pending call of the chair.